Hey, Jacinda.
Hola, Nico. Hi, Jacinta.
Ah, hola, Paula. Que estás
¿Cómo
como
estás?
Jacinda. Y tú estás como Jacinda en tu nombre.
Ah, qué raro.
¿Sí o no?
¿What? Yo
Sí,
también
tú.
así, Hi, Jacinta. Wow. A ver, déjame ver. Voy a volver a entrar y salir. ¿Por qué estoy con Jacinta? Ah, es lo que pasó en uno de mis webinars. Este es con el Zoom de Ambition Loop, ¿no es cierto?
Yo sí.
Ok, voy a salir y voy a volver a entrar a ver qué pasó. ¿Ya?
Start the meeting? Yes. So
Perfect,
you, it's
thank you.
on you, Jacinda, for
Yes, and
now.
you'll start the recording. Perfect. So Nico, maybe you can give me a thumbs up when you have let everyone in. And in the meantime, we are going to do a Leaders Quest normal
Jacinda,
process
everyone is
here.
in.
Okay, great. And we're going to do a Leaders Quest activity just to get this meeting started. We're all very busy individuals, so we're going to take 30 seconds of silence to bring ourselves into this session so that we can really see how we can get together to finance the future. So we'll just take 30 seconds of silence, and then I will hand over to John Paul and Anne-Marie Chitzero, our hosts for today. Thank you. Okay, great. And with that, we will start our Sharing Actions Africa 2025. We're really excited today to have our host from the UN Special Office of Africa Advisor, Mr. John Paul Adam, and our co-host for today, for her first time joining us as a co-host, Ms. Anne-Marie Chitzero. So we're really with FSD Africa Climate Investment Office, and she's the Chief Investment Officer there. So we're really looking forward to this session, and please do add any comments in the chat, your questions in the chat. It'll help us keep the conversations going. And one last housekeeping item is that we will share with you a document that has some brief background materials on all of the companies on this call. So we won't spend time doing a overview of each of the companies. We'll just dive straight into the meat. And if you need overview materials, you'll be able to reference the annex. So with that, thank you so much for joining us today, and over to JP and Anne-Marie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacinda, and good morning to everyone from New York. Good afternoon, good evening, depending from where you are joining. And I'm delighted to be co-hosting today with Anne-Marie this Sharing Actions Africa conversation on financing the future, the real economy in transition. So thank you so much to Ambition Loop, the Climate Champions team, for putting this together, and really for us to make progress on the regional platforms for climate projects and really deliver concrete action that builds climate resilience, but also particularly speaking from an African perspective that unlocks Africa's superpower, which is nature. We know that climate has the biggest impact on the vulnerable countries in Africa. And by addressing climate resilience, we can better situate African countries in terms of moving towards a new economic model, which moves away, for example, from extractive industrialization towards a more sustainable economic model where Africa's comparative advantage is perhaps situated through its natural resources, through its large amounts of renewable energy potential, and also where we can harness Africa's demographic dividend with the largest number of young people in the world expected to be Africans. Tapping into these opportunities is especially critical at this time where official development assistance is falling. And there is a need for us to unlock predictable forms of financing. So in terms of today's conversation, we really want to bring stakeholders together to discuss climate and nature finance, to strengthen our networks, and to look at the ways in which we can close funding gaps. This also means looking at innovations, and we want to look at case studies. We want to look at where there are successes, because we are firm believers that where there is something that has worked, often the biggest opportunity then is to scale up. And for today's discussion, we will have to move very fast. So we will ask each speaker to be as succinct as possible, to remain within 5 minutes. And we would like all participants, please constantly feed your questions, your comments into the chat, which will allow us to have a very dynamic and vibrant discussion. And as we put forward these innovative solutions, we want to be thinking specifically what we want to take, for example, to COP30, how we can leverage the South Africa G20 presidency, and how actions that we are putting forward make a real difference for Africa, not only as a continent that is vulnerable, but a continent that has huge opportunities. So I will stop there, hand over to Anne-Marie, who will make some brief introductory remarks and then also introduce our first speakers. Anne-Marie, over to you.
Great, thank you very much. And again, I extend my thanks to the Ambassador Loop team. Apologies for the noise for nature outside. So really thank you all for joining this and look forward to a vibrant discussion. I won't take too much of the time because we do want to hear from all of you. But really just to pick up on something that Jean-Paul said, which is predictable forms of long-term finance or finance for the long term. And I do think it's important that we think about these case studies, think about these innovations, think about these initiatives within the context of the African continent that offers, as Jean-Paul said, a lot of opportunity, particularly around nature, energy solutions, climate adaptation. But to think about them in terms of embedding them and strengthening the ability of our own financial sector to respond to our needs. And I think this is critically important, given, as we are all witnessing, the changing dynamics of global sort of development assistance and development finance. And it's critically important that we on the African continent are thinking about how do we take this opportunity to really look inward and really look at the solutions that are coming from our own financial system. And so therefore, how do we ensure strong partnerships? How do we ensure the coming together of different pools of capital, African capital, philanthropic capital, development finance capital, capital that's coming from the various parts of our financial system to unlock those opportunities? So so partnerships are going to become incredibly important as we try to take on this challenge and take on and finance the opportunities that we're seeing. So I don't want to say much more because I think it's important that we hear from all of you, and 5 minutes is not a lot of time. And so, again, as Jean-Paul said, try to be brief. I think it's important if you can just, in your 5 minutes, communicate 2 or 3 key messages that will help stimulate this discussion. So what are the challenges? What are the opportunities? What are the solutions that you're driving? How can this be accelerated through partnerships and through partnerships with people on this call and others that have been part of the Climate Champions initiative? So without further ado, I want to go to our first and distinguished speaker, Dr. Mahmoud Moheldin. And we all know him. He's the special envoy of financing the 2030 agenda in the United Nations. We're looking to you to continue to give us the inspiration to be bold, to be courageous, and to move fast. So Dr. Moheldin, over to you.
Right. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. It's good to see you and to see Jean-Paul as well. And many thanks for the organizers, the Ambition Group, and my good friends, the climate champions. So within the 5 minutes, I'm speaking to you today from Venice, discussing climate finance and how to link it to the efforts for the finance for development, and dealing with one of the bigger crises that developing economies and emerging markets are facing, including in our continent, which is the debt crisis. So you have here a few issues to handle at the same time. We have the debt crisis, we have climate finance challenges, and we have illicit flows from our continent. And we have spillovers of some of the major economies, policies and measures that some of them even being initiated to deal with the climate crisis, but they have negative spillovers, including the CBAM. So how can you handle that? And that could really be relevant for a few weeks back, but now recently we have seen some more challenges impacting our global system through trade protectionism. ODA, official development assistance, is in the decline. So this is very much the kind of background that we need really to put into consideration in order to make any kind of policy undertaken and any measure and any initiative useful and impactful. Having said that, I see it a moment for our continent because regionalism is being now revisited in order to deal with some of the global geopolitical tensions. I encourage you to have a look at the recent op-ed by the Prime Minister of Malaysia calling on the ASEAN and GCC countries to meet for a summit in May to deal with the issues of concern that I just mentioned, including matters related to trade, finance, technological collaboration, but taking it from a regional perspective. And now in Africa, as we have seen during the last couple of years, good momentum, especially in trade collaboration, good momentum in many initiatives addressing issues on capacity development and technical collaboration, initiatives covering the African carbon market, Financial Alliance on Climate Change, even Glasgow Finance Alliance for Net Zero continuing its work with emphasis on the pipeline of bankable investable projects, carbon credit markets, and capacity development. And we have as well the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program, and we have the Marrakesh Pledge. I think all of these kind of initiatives need to get their act together because we are overwhelmed by populist measures, ignoring the importance of climate change, ignoring the importance of international collaboration, impacting the availability of funds, including the ODA. So what could be best done here? There are two things, and please give me a 1 minute signal if I'm already close to my deadline. So
yes,
I would say
I'm going to ask you to wrap up. Thank you.
I'll wrap up. So two things here. One is basically applying what's so-called the judo strategies. Basically, take the energy of the of your opponent by being more flexible, fast, nimble, and leverage what you have. The second thing is basically focusing on prevention of harms, of debt, of climate, of illicit flows, and spillovers. The third is basically going fast in the opportunities that are there for us, like the Seville conference in the FFD, like the G20 in South Africa, like the summit, the COP summit in Brazil, in Belém, in order to enhance the opportunities. And then, and finally, issues related to that we cannot ignore. And there are many measures, including the work that I'm doing with Trevor Manuel, formidable Minister of Finance of South Africa, with Paulo Gentiloni and Professor Wang. We are trying to put measures that are very ambitious, but they do not require any kind of political leadership to push them or to stop them. So they are technically strong, but they are being handled from a kind of a very technical perspective with regional emphasis and local impact. Happy to share them at some stage, but for the benefit of time, this is very much a systemic kind of a challenge that we're dealing with structural implications, not just a cycle that will come and move. We need really to take necessary measures to handle them and the solutions are there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moaldin. Yes, I totally agree on the need for some systemic change, and we'll certainly follow up on you on the debt measures with Trevor Manuel. I'm going to swiftly move on to our next distinguished speaker, Nigel Topping, who's the co-founder of Ambition Loop. Nigel, over to you for some more provocative challenges. You have Nigel?
Sorry, Anne-Marie, I just had my technical challenge of getting on speaker. First of all, great to see everybody, and Anne-Marie, John Paul, thank you for co-hosting. I wanted to really just follow on from Mahmoud, just to describe a little bit some of the work that we're trying to do to really go from the focus on individual transactions, which is the work which Mahmoud was the mastermind of, and which continues with the high-level climate champions of these regional platforms, bringing together project originators with providers of finance. And Anne-Marie, this is what you do for your day job, right? So you know all about this. But what we've recognized is that a few years ago, we felt that we were kind of bored with people saying, we've got good initiatives, there's no capital, and other people saying, we've got loads of capital, there's no initiatives. And we felt we had to jam people together. And so this diagram, which I hope everyone can see, what we're calling the Earth Investment Engine, is just in very simple terms trying to describe how we see scaling this up. So instead of just focusing on individual transactions, we eventually bring about systemic change. I'll just describe what we're trying to do here. And many of you, everyone in this call is involved in some way or another. First thing we recognize, and Anne-Marie, we discussed this the other day with the nature-based solutions pipeline work that you're doing, that actually there's quite a lot of good initiatives generating pipelines of investable opportunities, but they're all subscale by definition, because the scale is huge, and often no one can see them all. Different people are involved in different ones. So the first thing that we recognize is that actually creating a bigger pool of, a sort of macro pipeline, bringing all these different pipeline partners together. So this is something that Jacinda's doing, pulling together a bigger and bigger loop of pipeline partners. And there's lots of benefits from that. One is learning from each other, because it's hard work. Two is realizing that there's actually a bigger pipeline than any one initiative. There's a much bigger pipeline of opportunities than any one initiative. Three, I think, is improving the quality of the pipeline, because one thing that we do know, we learned this from the champions work, is that when good initiatives are badly presented to capital providers who are new to this space, it pushes the whole movement back a long way, right? Because those who are skeptical, they see something that's not well prepared or not well thought through, and it kind of proves to them that they were right to be skeptical. So improving the quality of the pipeline so that only really well qualified opportunities get exposed to capital providers, especially new capital providers, is super important. The next step I wanted to show is that we've been working very closely with our friends Capital for Climate, who we started partnering with at COP26 actually, and who've done an amazing job in creating a really well curated, I'd say, investment grade quality platform, which allows investors to see the science-based pathways for investment, to see the whole ecosystem, and to see that pipeline. And so a lot of the work that Jacinda's been doing with those pipeline partners is helping prepare opportunities so that they can all be shared on that Capital for Climate platform. And Mahmoud, I know that GFANZ Africa was really keen to do that. And then the next stage is somebody's got to, you can't just put together a database of opportunities. Somebody's got to curate the system, and in well developed markets and well developed sectors, there's a whole ecosystem of actors doing that. But we're talking about emerging and developing economies, and in the case of nature-based solutions, which is Jean-Paul and Anne-Marie reminded us, are big natural competitive advantages for the African continent, is still an emerging asset class. So that ecosystem around that. So what we realize is that lots of people need to be curating investors around these opportunities. So Ambition Luke's doing some of that on regenerative agriculture. Capital for Climate are particularly focused on nature-based solutions in Brazil so far, where they've mobilized a lot of finance. The Climate Champions, of course, and many others in different ways. And then of course, there's all the individual investors who need to be involved in those. So we're just trying to draw a picture of the kind of macro system. Underneath that, there are many of the enablers, whether they're providing advisory services or technical services or de-risking projects, vehicles and instruments. And then this top loop, we're trying to show, if you like, the second order learning, that the more we all work on how do we mobilize individual transactions, the more we see what the bottlenecks are. And we started with the Climate Capital Accelerator, the coalition of about 50 finance professionals who are all involved in this now, to collate what we're calling the rules of the game. Mahmoud's famously always said that the current financial flows are insufficient, inefficient, and unfair. So a lot of what we're doing is look at what are the rules which block capital from flowing, whether it's Basel III penalizing international investors from investing in non-OECD countries, whether it's local regulations. I know Anne-Marie from Evans, some of the African pension regulators putting a limit on how much local capital can be deployed, or whether it's the lack of a strong demand signal for carbon markets. There are a whole set of rules which, if we can unlock them, I'd like to think of us developing this in the next few months as perhaps as kind of more of a sort of bottom up, more of a private sector focused response to the Bridgetown agenda, which is very much around international architecture reform. But there are other things that need to happen. So we by coming together on all these pipelines and aggregating, and yes, driving to transactions and sharing what the problems are, we can come to a clearer view of what the rules of the game are that need to be fixed. And then finally, and this is part of what we're trying to do with sharing actions calls, I think we need a much better strategic communications. The whole narrative about climate finance in emerging markets has tended to fall into two traps. One, a sort of doom mongering, like everything's broken, nothing's working, it's a disaster. And so I think that kind of demographic benefit and that dynamism of emerging markets, which Anne-Marie talked about, is that there are lots of great examples of good things happening. I think we all collectively need to do a better job of finding them and telling people about them. That's a really good way of attracting more capital to a market, is to hear that there's good things happening and that somebody else is making money. And I think the other trap we often fall into is that it's all about the UNFCCC. And so again, I think talking about domestic resource mobilization, which is often taboo in the UNFCCC, super important. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Great. No, thank you very much, Nigel. Really great initiative. And I think one of the things that stood out for me is transactions. We need to get some transactions done, and we need to learn from those transactions in order to determine how do we scale them and do more of them. So good to hear from others during the course of this discussion on some of those transactions. We will have time to have a discussion, hopefully at the end of this session. So I'm just going to swiftly move on to our next speaker. And so I invite Jennifer Howard, who's the council chair of the Mangrove Breakthrough. And I know we've been talking to them about doing some transactions. So Jennifer, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity to present the Mangrove Breakthrough Hub. And while it might seem a little strange to have such a ecosystem focus on mangroves in particular, we really see it as a gateway into broader nature-based finance. Mangroves provide a huge bang for your buck when it comes to community engagement, mitigation, and adaptation, but they're also often forgotten about. when people focus on deep ocean or terrestrial forests, these systems fall right in the middle and are often unloved and not seen as the economic growth potential that I think that they really have. And so I really wanted to take my time to present the Mangrove Breakthrough, which was launched at COP27, and it's bringing together governments, non-governmental NGOs, researchers, and financiers to mobilize collectively around 4 main actions. The first one is to reduce human-driven mangrove loss. The second is to ensure long-term protection for over 80% of the world's remaining mangroves. We want to restore about 50% of the recent mangrove loss that's happened globally. But then most relevant to this conversation is really drive sustainable finance for long-term protection and sustainable management of mangroves at a global scale, and to have that really benefit people, climate, and biodiversity. So the Mangrove Breakthrough Hub and its partners are really working together to mobilize about $4 billion. That price or that dollar amount comes from some science-based assessments for what needs to happen, cost per hectare, and opportunity costs. And the mangrove conservation and protection that comes with that will again benefit largely coastal communities that are going to be hit the hardest by climate change, and to provide that mitigation and adaptation value from these coastal systems. The initiative in general will empower cross-sector collaborations and reinforce national policies. It will have a global pipeline as a component, which was something Nigel was just talking about is desperately needed, and then also driving transformative financial approaches. At its core, though, the hub is developing investment guidelines for capital markets, ensuring that mangrove ecosystems are properly valued and can attract targeted investment. And to help funders and investors direct capital efficiently, we are establishing the Global Mangrove Finance Facility. And that is a dedicated investment vehicle designed to channel large-scale funding into high-impact mangrove projects. This facility will specifically ensure capital reaches projects with measurable long-term benefits for people and nature, that it will leverage public, private, and philanthropic funding sources collectively, and will utilize a diverse revenue stream, including debt, equity, guarantee, and carbon markets all together. The facility will be publicly presented in June at the UN Ocean Conference, followed by a global investor roadshow leading to COP30 in Berlin, where we aim to launch with anchor funders. It was also mentioned earlier, this need for case studies. I think that this program will provide those in droves. In some examples already where we have finances flowing to West Africa in particular. I personally have been involved with a partner called in Liberia to develop a blue ocean program, and that is Swedish government funding. We have partners called West Africa Blue that are accessing the carbon market in Sierra Leone. We have partner Seawater Solutions, which has a project in Ghana, which is combining mangrove protection with saltwater agriculture. I think these are really good examples in how the hub really wants to provide support for programs like these, but also a framework and funding to stitch all of these individual programs together into a larger scale comprehensive program that benefits people and the planet. And we're very excited to get it off the ground and launched. And you see the QR code here. Nigel is also involved, and more than happy to take questions in the chat and to be linked up for anybody that wants more information.
Great. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Yeah, I guess one of our transactions is, I think, one that you're going to be featuring as a case study, which is the Sierra Leone one. So this is really exciting. Look forward to the roadshow and the launch in June. Moving on now to Louise Baker, who's the Managing Director of the Global Mechanism, UNCCD. Louise, over to you.
Thanks very much, Anne-Marie, and lovely to meet you all. I guess I'm the non-UNFCCC that Nigel referenced earlier. The UNCCD is the Land and Drought Convention. I want to try and stick to a couple of points maybe that are sort of good news in the UNCCD process that maybe help drive forward this agenda collectively. First, we had our COP in Saudi Arabia in December, where there were large commitments into investment in this space, largely coming from investors from the Arab region. So they're known as the Arab Coordination Group, including, in fact, I think I'll probably talk about the first one, which is drought. First, a drought initiative. This is being designed at the minute to move from drought reactivity. We tend to kind of react to drought as a humanitarian crisis, to move into a proactive approach to drought. So this will look at investing in projects, a mixture of grant and then loan or guarantee funding as blended finance for mostly country-led projects, but not just, that move to a proactive response to drought. So this can be drip irrigation, it can be insurance products, it can be desalination plants, a real blend of what's needed to bridge this gap between treating drought as a reactive problem to being more proactive about it. Design phase at the minute, validation June, July in another meeting in Saudi Arabia. It will target the 77 lower and middle income countries. So many African countries will benefit from this. Parallel to this, an impact investment fund is being developed for more private sector led operations out of Luxembourg. So very, very happy to talk to people who are building interesting business propositions around drought resilience. So that's one area that I think we'd like to collaborate on quite strongly. Second area touches on this rangelands issue coming out of COP in Riyadh, very strong message that rangelands are an important ecosystem that tends to get ignored. And I know I'm with climate people here now, but climate people, worse people, because they look at this beautiful rangeland stuff and say, haha, empty space, let's put some trees on it and save the world. So really what we're talking about here is valuing the rangelands and grassland ecosystems in their own right, making them resilient to climate change, but also recognizing the cultural and economic value that rangelands have for societies around the world. And what's really interesting about this, I think, is there's real impact, there's real demand for this from every region. This is the first thing under UNCCD that I've worked on. It's not a them and us issue. This demand for this from the leading countries, actually Mongolia, Uruguay, and Botswana were the ones who really pushed this. But you're seeing real uptake on this from the American ranchers, from the Australians, from people who raise goats in the mountains of Switzerland. There's a real demand for this rangelands agenda coming out of different regions of the world. So I think there's a momentum behind that. The final thing I wanted to reference was around the G20 initiative. So UNCCD is the host of the G20 Land Initiative. It's a mostly advocacy related operation, but we're really delighted with the way that South Africa has taken up land desertification, land degradation and drought in the context of their G20. We obviously don't know the outcomes yet, but it's very much looking like they want to change that narrative around the sort of land restoration agenda and looking for investment into land restoration and making the most of that economic asset that's massive in the African region, really looking at private sector investment into this space. And so we're hoping that there will be some really positive news and some really positive spaces for intervention in the context of G20 discussions coming forward. So more than happy to work with anybody if they want to collaborate with us on this. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Louise. I'm going to hand over to Jean-Paul.
No, thank you so much, Anne-Marie, and great to hear all of the fantastic stories we've heard so far. I would like to just ask Greg to bear with us because I think he was technically scheduled as the next speaker, but we need to bring in Dorothy. So Dorothy, very pleased to have you. Dorothy Maseke, who is the lead for nature finance at Financial Sector Deepening Africa and head of the African Natural Capital Alliance Secretariat, who will speak to us about a nature-based solutions accelerator. Dorothy, great to have you and to hear some updates in terms of what is possible.
Great. Are my slides up?
I think go ahead and
Okay.
I'm sure they
Okay.
will bring it up very shortly.
Okay, great.
Apologies, we have to move a little bit fast because we're
No, it's fine. No problem at all. I think I just want to mention a couple of things. And, you know, when we are told to speak about what we're doing in 5 minutes, it's not as easy. I'll try my very best. And so I won't talk about the Alliance, but I'll talk about more on the nature-based accelerator that we've set up. And this is the Carbon Accelerator Program for the Environment. And particularly, this accelerator seeks to solve a number of challenges that, you know, have been mentioned here today. Challenges to do with lack of pipeline, challenges to do with lack of credible projects, or so investors say. I say that in quotes because it's something that you get to see or you get to understand depending on whom you're speaking to. And so we set up this accelerator that is meant to accelerate integration of nature positive business opportunities across Africa. We are going to be selecting the first cohort by the end of May. And we've already, you know, in this process, have been speaking to our investments arm, and Anne-Marie is here. And, you know, speaking about how to then use our investments arm to invest in what we call CAPE graduates. Or these are, you know, nature-based carbon solutions who graduate from this accelerator. The accelerator essentially seeks to provide project development support, you know, tailored transaction advisory. There's also a living lab that we are setting up, you know, to share lessons. And essentially what we're looking to support are projects which are just past feasibility stage, meaning they've finished their feasibility studies, but they need to get into investor readiness. And so by the time they graduate from CAPE, they should have had at least their PDDs finalized, their projects should have been registered, and there'll be a commercial case. And so we would have supported them through into that particular stage. The type of projects we are looking at are REDD+ projects, blue carbon, you know, soil agriculture, peatland, ARR kind of projects. But, you know, we were specifically told to speak about, you know, what are the most valuable lessons we've learned in relation to, you know, setting this up. And speaking to project developers and speaking to project developers, project implementers, and then investors, we get to see that investors really have similar needs, broadly speaking. They're seeking returns, they're seeking credible projects, they're seeking a strong pipeline, which unfortunately is not always readily available for them. And essentially, this underscores the need for investor roadshows, matchmaking, and other engagement efforts. Of course, having built upon, you know, having in place projects that have gotten to a point where they are, you know, commercially ready. We also see that investor approaches vary significantly. Some investors prioritize carbon, while others focus on nature. And so sometimes it's very challenging to strike, you know, the right balance. Louis, you spoke about it, you know, when there's a rangeland, you know, what do you plant trees or do you leave it for soil carbon? You know, so again, investor approaches vary, and the investors are very keen on particular, some are keen on particular aspects, some are not. There are those that you speak to, and the moment you say carbon, they actually just back off. And so we are learning to strike the right balance. We also see that a flexible approach is really essential to accommodate, of course, these diverse investor priorities. I want to mention, out of the 100 or so applications that we received out of our carbon accelerator, the blue economy, unfortunately, remained significantly underrepresented, despite its vast potential. Actually, we only saw one blue carbon project applying out of over 100 submissions, which was pretty surprising. And then the last aspect that I want to say is that solution providers, including, you know, data providers, assessment firms, these guys play a critical role in enabling, credibility of solutions. And many times, many of the accelerators that have been set up, or much of the support given, does not take into account these solutions providers. And so again, a new lesson for us, we are learning to see, or we are learning, or we are looking at, providing support to this type of entities. Those who are not, we are not speaking only of the carbon credit, developers, but also solution providers. So what's needed, and I finish in a minute or so,
Yes,
collaborative
20
action.
seconds would be great.
Yes, collaborative action, knowledge sharing, capacity building is so important. But what we're saying is, when you talk about collaborative action, you're not just talking about the convening piece. The problem is so big, a small group cannot do it alone. And so the joining up of accelerators, the joining up of funds, the creation of sectoral hubs would be so essential, so that we win together rather than, losing alone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. And when you talk about the blue economy, you're speaking my language. And we need to look at particularly that pipeline in those areas, but really encouraging in terms of what you have already done so far. If I could ask you to share your slides again with the team, and they will make sure that they are distributed. Okay. If I could now go to Greg, and thank you very much, Greg, for your patience. We'll go to Greg Fishbane. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, the Agriculture Director at the Nature Conservancy, and hearing some innovative finance from the Amazon region and looking at how this can be useful as well in the African context. Over to you, Greg. If we can be as diligent to the time as possible.
Yes, great, of course. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, Greg Fishbane with the Nature Conservancy. So I'm going to talk about a couple of related initiatives we're working on that do not currently touch down in Africa, but could yes, be applied to Africa and other regions. The region of focus of this work is in South America, particularly Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay, where the big issue that we're seeking to address is tropical deforestation. Brazil alone is about 30% of global tropical deforestation. So that's kind of a key imperative to solve. Now, TNC, government, others have been working for decades on this issue, including stronger government enforcement of laws and working with supply chain companies on their sourcing commitments and traceability. But we do see finance as a very critical piece of the puzzle, so to speak, to really create the transition to agricultural growth without deforestation. So and we know that the demand for food is going to grow dramatically in the coming decades, and so we need to find a way to sort of support that growth and farmer incomes and economic development. At the same time, we're decoupling this growth from further conversion of natural habitat. So a key part of that is to drive more finance to the production models that can accomplish that, including directing agriculture to degraded pasture land, increasing yields, agroforestry, restoration and protection of forest and on farmlands. And so we created an initiative in 2021 at COP26. It was launched with the Tropical Forest Alliance, UN, and the Nature Conservancy called IFAC, which is really a coalition of the leading companies, banks, fund managers in Brazil that finance farmers to raise the visibility and ambition of this and kind of help them create an environment and social impact framework around how this is done. As was mentioned earlier, to really not bring in some new separate vehicle, but to really empower and support the financial community and financial infrastructure already existing in Brazil to direct more capital to this need. So as of into 2024, we've got 24 signatories who have committed billions of dollars to disperse towards this in the coming years. And as of the end of 2024, there were $500 million that were dispersed through the vehicles that were created aligned with this initiative through 17 different financial products. And we have a market report that just came out that you can look up that has more detail on all of that. Now, we feel really good about this progress, but it's still slower than we need. Our goal for 2030 is $10 billion in disbursements, and we're not at that pace yet. And what we increasingly hear from our partners, financial partners who work on this, is they need more access to catalytic capital to accelerate, the progress that's happening at this point, and get to scale. And catalytic capital meaning taking subordinated positions in financial vehicles that are financing farmers to crowd in the commercial capital that is very eager and interested to get to bigger scale, but because of the tenor, the long tenors, and the limited track record of some of the production models that are being financed, they can't quite, even though it's all profitable, they can't quite finance it all commercially yet. And so the idea is, we need a period of catalytic capital to really help accelerate growth. And I think that's probably true in a lot of emerging markets as well. So in response to that, there's one more slide, if you can click to that one. We are working with our partners on a new vehicle we call CCAT, Catalytic Capital for the Agricultural Transition, which is a vehicle that will do exactly what I said, take subordinated positions in financial vehicles created by leading banks, fund managers, et cetera, to really get these efforts to scale and moving more quickly. Our goal is a $200 million fund, and we're working to get to a first close at least by well before the COP later this year. We're working with our IFAC partners, TFA, UNEP, but also the Moore Foundation, which is an anchor investor in the fund, and Vox Capital, our fund manager. And we certainly welcome partners and supporters that have interest in helping us make this successful, and also open to discussions about how all this could be applied more in Africa or other regions where I think many similar issues are present. So I will stop there, and thanks for the time.
Well, thank you so much, Greg. And I think you've really highlighted how we need de-risking, and we need to mobilize at scale and have that predictable access to finance. So wishing you all the best, and hopefully we can make a lot of progress on this. I now would like to build a little bit on what you have presented to invite Jaha Doucouré, who will speak to us about regenerative agriculture hubs. Jaha, over to you. And I would also invite everyone to please look at her book, which I think is an absolutely fantastic one. I Will Scream to the World. My little plug on your behalf. But over to you, Jaha.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. I would love to thank Jacinda and the whole team at Ambition Loop for having us this morning. Our project, which is Regenerative Hubs, we come to regenerative agriculture from a place of trying to end violence against women and girls and uplift women out of poverty from decades of experience. And what we did was we brought together a team of climate smart agricultural experts in education, certification, project implementation, as well as sustainable financial systems, which was what led to the launch of regenerative hubs. And our first project, which is in Gambia, we use the power of a nitrogen fixing tree called Pongamia, which is indigenous to India, and it produces higher levels of protein per hectare than soybeans, and top quality biofuel for sustainable aviation fuel. And then we use that to intercrop things like cowpea, castor, sesame, to create a holistic regenerative agroforestry system. We have about 3,000 hectares of land on the river of the Gambia. And, we have our technical assistant partners for regenerative hubs include the Soil and Climate Initiative, as well as they do the regenerative certification, and our educational programs are run by the Howard G. Buffett Center for No-Till Agriculture, as well as the ecosystem service payments. And the reason why we, started this project and looking for funding, we are partnering with a company called Phyla. They were the ones that introduced the Pongamia trees to us. Being a survivor of FGM and child marriage, and the work that I've done across the continent of Africa, every time you ask a woman that is in a violent situation, why can't you leave? One of the things that they tell you is, where would I go? How do I return back to my parents' house? And for us, being that we are from the continent of Africa, we felt that it was important to have an agricultural program that targets women in our communities, but bring in all of these experts to have that holistic system. And we signed a JV agreement with Phyla. We were able to secure the 3,000 hectares of land from the government of the Gambia. And this slide shows that, you know, the amount of money that we need over 3 years, as well as what the returns would look like. So that's basically us. But if you want more information about what we're doing, please do reach out and let me know.
Thank you so much, Shahab. Really inspiring. And particularly, I love the fact that you put people at the center of nature, because nature means nothing without people, without the people who protect it and the livelihoods that are generated from that. So thank you so much. And thank you as well for helping us gain back a little bit of time as well. I go back to Anne-Marie for the next set of speakers.
Great, thank you very much. I think we're going to shift gears slightly and hear more from the insurance sector. So it's my pleasure to ask Naliswa Har, who's the head of projects and partnerships at Humanity Insured. Nalisa, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name.
No worries, and Anna-Marie, it's Neliswa, and thank you so much for having me here today, and thank you to the team at Ambition Loop for putting this together. So yes, so my name is Neliswa. I am with a new, fairly new entity called Humanity Insured, which is a not-for-profit that is backed by the insurance sector. So a little bit different to the presentations that we've had here today, in that this is almost like a private sector initiative that is looking for partners to be able to do the work that we are doing. So we have been working for the last, I want to say, few months. Since October last year, we were officially launched, but we've been able to do quite a few things, exciting projects. Our main mission as Humanity Insured is that we want to be able to stop climate disasters driving poverty. I don't have to go into a lot of that, because I think the people in this group here know what we are talking about here. And just this slide is just showing that who some of our donors are. The reason why Humanity Insured came about was because of the global funding shortfall for disasters. I think the numbers in 2016 were 8 billion, and that number increased to 31.5 billion last year. And I can imagine that number has probably increased even further this year. But our objective is really to scale and replicate projects that have demonstrated the positive impact and resilience that financial preparedness generates for those in the climate frontline. We want to be able to use insurance to be able to fill that gap for that shortfall. So our ambition is to use insurance to close at least 10% of that funding shortfall going forward. So if you think about what we do, it's quite simple, really. We take the world's most advantaged insurance solutions and make them accessible to the most vulnerable people, so that people can rebuild, recover, and thrive. And we provide grants, essentially. We provide grants for organizations, initiatives to be able to pay for insurance premiums, to be able to buy resilience tools, educate and train people. And because we are backed by the insurance industry, we also fund climate modeling and analytics. And we focus on 4 communities. The 4 communities are smallholder farmers, coastal communities, urban informal workers, and displaced people. So when we are looking for projects, we're looking within those 4 different communities. I think I do have an example that I wanted to share of some of the work that we have done, but we've done lots of work with projects that focus on smallholder farmers, which I can give examples. And I guess when Jaha was speaking and Greg was speaking, I was thinking, you know, there's so much opportunity there within those projects where we can look at insurance playing a part in those projects too. So I think I've got a slide after this. Oh, okay. This is just why the insurance industry, and this speaks to what we know that insurance can do, right? Mobilizing insurance capacity to multiply the impact, and we know how that can work. But I think what's been really great with the way that Humanity Insured has worked and what's been valuable is that we've had this radical collaboration of these insurers that have been able to back the work that we do. And maybe to bring it back to a real life example, I wasn't sure if that's on my slides or not, but I can just talk through it if we can. Okay, it's not on there, but I can bring a real life example. So one example that is a little bit different is an example that we are working with an entity in Zambia, and we are working with this entity, and in Zambia currently drought is a big challenge, and it is intensifying the human-wildlife conflict in Zambia. So what we've been able to really work with that organization to do is create a compensation fund that is topped up by parametric drought insurance to be able to safeguard the livelihoods of people. And so what happens is that when there is a drought, there can be a trigger. And when the trigger happens, that goes into the compensation fund that is able to compensate people using insurance tools so that people who live alongside the nature, the reserve can be able to build resilience by either using starting farms for bees, which can help with elephants, apparently are scared of bees. They can start farms with chilies as well, and also be able to build back better when animals have trampled over their land. But the reason why I give this example...
Can you wrap up real quick? I think you've run out of 5 minutes.
Why I give example in particular is because it's a really different way that you can use insurance to be able to build resilience. But either way, happy to speak to people and give more information about what we can do, and looking forward to collaborating with anyone out there. So thank you.
It's very exciting, and really hats off to Howden. I think the insurance sector is really undervalued, overlooked, and it's really great to see this initiative. And how do we bring in insurance in many different aspects to drive more climate finance and also to de-risk financing for climate. So please do share your case study. I think it'll be really interesting to see.
Thanks,
On swiftly to our next speaker. So I'm going to call on Andrew Mude, who is with the African Development Bank, to walk us through the de-risking agricultural finance and climate resilience initiative. Again, looking at the role of insurance and de-risking mechanisms. Andre.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the Ambition Loop for having us here. I think it's also great to go after Neliswa. I don't know if there was a slide. I had one slide to actually highlight the specific initiative of the African Development Bank that is really our effort to help advance the provision of climate resilience, particularly in the agri-sector. This is the Africa Climate Risk Insurance Facility for Adaptation. So this was recently launched as a facility designed to mobilize $1 billion as catalytic resource, basically to de-risk investments and expand climate protection. But really, particularly focusing on building the capacity of the African insurance industry to really leverage their balance sheets and to direct and support their investments in building up a portfolio at the intersection of agriculture and climate risk. So we have five pillars for this, and I'll just describe them quickly conceptually, and then talk about how we are concretely working to advance this within an operational framework. So first, as I said, our key target is to really leverage and develop Africa's insurance ecosystem. I think, of course, there's been a lot of support to some of the pilots that have been around from global reinsurers, and there'll always be a need to repatriate some of the excess risk. But we feel that to really be able to build the capacities of climate or protection, we really need to get the insurance industry involved. Last year, the African Insurance Organization had as its key theme in its annual meeting, African Insurance, Climate and Disaster Risk. They have a real intention to come into this space, but require a set of support to help with some of the challenges there are. And one of the challenges we try to focus on our second pillar, which is really about assessing the client acquisition challenge. I don't think the African insurers, brokers, reinsurers have their biggest challenge with regards to climate and insurance risk is the fragmentation. The fragmentation that makes it quite challenging to collect investable volumes. Whether you're focusing on smallholder farmers, whether you're focusing on also the agri-food value chain, a lot of it being serviced by small, medium enterprises, collecting sufficient volume of business for it to become of interest to insurers is quite a bit of a challenge. And so we work to focus on an aggregation platform, looking at going through financial institutions and supporting their investment portfolios to smallholder farmers or agri-SMEs, and working to de-risk those directly with some of the aggregators that they on-lend to. These could be cooperatives, this could be farm associations, working to link them with the insurance ecosystem. And third, of course, is product design, and product designs that are specific to actual context, actual regions, different agroecologies, also different seasonalities, different crops. I think every risk is very specific and requires quite a bit of capacity and capacity to design their relevant products. Also, not just whether it's production products, yield products, but also portfolio risk, credit risk at the level of the of financial institutions and the portfolio bearers, whether it be insurtechs coming in as well, platforms aggregating smallholder farmers and the like. And the next level of this is, of course, the enabling framework. A lot of work needs to be done in making sure the right type of data is available and the infrastructure is put in place. Of course, capacity is a big one. This particular skills, capabilities. The insurance industry already has a dearth of actuarial capability. But if you're looking to focus in the climate space, agriculture space, you need to bring involved agronomists, data scientists, remote sensing scientists. You need capability within the regulators, especially also to understand how to align within climate financing frameworks. And that's the fifth part of the framework, which is really anchoring systematically insurance as a bona fide climate finance adaptation intervention in order to align with climate financing goals, attract climate finance, and particularly with a very national focus, making sure that these are not only integrated in national adaptation plans and linked up to NDCs, but that there's a framework for an operation execution. So just to end by, right now, I think one of the earlier calls of the Ambition Loop is really a focus on concrete regional operations. Right now, I'm in Ethiopia working with a regional reinsurer and working specifically on projects looking at identifying participating financial institutions that are working with insurers to develop the right types of products. There is already a regional operation where governments in the region have taken out substantial headroom, and that headroom is going to be used to de-risk de-risk the support to participate in farmer institutions, not just as passing on concessions, guarantees, but also climate insurance products. There's significant amount of resource there to build capacity, as I mentioned, working with the regional regulators, the local regulators, to make sure that we're talking about sustainable capacity building, so curriculum that is standardized and is certified. Also, that products that are developed are the right types of products, and there's a authority that is able to identify the quality of these products, and then also TA to be able to design effective products. So this is something that we. So you got me right as I was about to finish. So
right, no, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is all very exciting. Congratulations, and it would be great to hear some, more details, some of the partners, some of the insurers that you're working with. So well done on that. I'm just going to move on rapidly now to Dauda Sambene, who is the founder and CEO of Africa Catalyst. Africatalyst, Dauda, sorry.
All right, thank you, Anne-Marie. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I have 5 minutes, so I'll be actually going straight to the point. I think when I listen to Nigel, there is a number of rules of game that are actually sort of undermining our ability to unlock more finance for climate and nature. I will be focusing on one of them, which I was asked to talk about, is the high cost of capital, particularly in Africa. It's easy to talk about how to unlock adequate and predictable finance for climate and nature solutions. But if we don't really solve the issue about the cost of finance, then chances are we won't be able to actually achieve those previous objective that I talked about. So there are many reasons why there is a high cost of capital in many developing countries, particularly in Africa. One of them is, I was asked to focus on, is the relation to credit ratings. As you may all know, I guess credit ratings, actually agencies play a key role in facilitating the mobilization of capital from the global north to the global south. There is a lot of controversy about how they do so when it comes to some countries in the global south, particularly in Africa. I won't be focusing on that controversy. I was actually this morning moderating a discussion of an online discussion of the African Union with people like Trevor, Manuel, and others. And of course, there is some controversy about whether or not Africa needs a credit rating agencies. I won't get to that. I want to get to something that we've been doing that has been quite consensual in many ways, which is how you can help African countries sort of improve their credit ratings through better understanding of the credit rating process, the methodologies, and how the credit rating agencies operates, but also by building their capacities to very much enhance and improve those aspects that can actually lead to improved credit ratings, whether we are talking about the policy framework, whether we are talking about the statistical framework, whether we are talking about macro stability, and all of those issues. I think that's what have been actually the focus of our work at Africatalyst. We've been partnering with the UNDP and other partners to as part of what we call an Africa Credit Rating Initiative, which aim essentially to achieve those objectives that I talked about, which is, of course, to help African countries better understand the process and better engage with credit rating agencies. And our initiative is fold. We first sort of try to facilitate access to all the information about the methodologies, about the research, about the processes through a web portal that are accessible to African officials that are involved in the credit rating process. That's one. We also put in place a pool of high-power advisors. Many of them are former senior executive in credit rating agencies, so that they can also engage with those officials to help them better understand and, of course, respond to their question about what type of actionable recommendation and policies they can put in place to achieve that goal. And finally, we also are facilitating a number of interaction through national and regional workshops, where we very much get together a community of practitioners that are involved in credit ratings, whether they come from the Ministry of Finance, the central banks, and other organizations within African countries, to discuss, to engage with our experts, but also to learn from each other about how they can very much improve their engagement with credit rating. And of course, we also engage with credit rating agencies to make sure that we also facilitate the dialogue they're having with African countries. I was in New York a couple of days ago, and this is one opportunity that we had to meet with the big three, Fitch, Moody's, and S&P, to discuss about that, how they can really do they can engage more constructively and more positively with African countries for that purpose. I have 5 minutes. I hope I can actually give you one or two for change. Thank you.
Oda, thank you very much. Yeah, I think the cost of capital is a really tricky one. In addition to addressing this issue of credit ratings, I just came from the Global Bonds Market Conference in Cape Town, and we were looking at sort of private credit and how the blending of different players could also help solve that cost of capital issue, because they're looking at risk slightly differently. So all these initiatives are incredibly important. So thank you for that. As we try to drive more of our domestic capital into climate, we need to be addressing those structural problems in our financial system. Jean-Paul, back to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Anne-Marie, and thank you to all the speakers so far. Really fantastic comments. And we have two more, and I would ask the two speakers to be as succinct as possible, because so we have time for some discussion. I'm going to go to Gregor Pipin from the Sustainable Sovereign Debt Hub. And I think this follows on quite nicely from Dauda's presentation, because the cost of capital is a problem. In Africa, in particular, we have rising debt levels. And perhaps part of the solution is looking at sustainability-linked debt instruments. So over to you, Gregor. You can explain a little bit the work of the hub.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Jean-Paul. I'll try to be as fast as possible. The hub has been brought together to give a platform to basically all different stakeholders in this space, from the sovereign and sub-sovereign issuers on one side to the institutional investors on the other, and everyone in between. And by that, I mean the MDBs, DFIs, who can provide credit enhancement to sovereigns issuing debt, to investment bankers, credit rating agencies, second-party opinion providers, and other NGOs working in this space. So given the very different types of stakeholders that we're engaging with, it's like logically that we've been covering very many different areas, but the common denominator to all of them is the integration of nature and climate related KPIs into sovereign debt structures. And how we see it is basically that choosing the right KPIs and the right targets that are material for specific countries, we can unlock this virtuous circle of KPI linked debt, where meeting the targets can reduce the sovereign risk, which of course means lower sovereign debt costs for financing, which creates fiscal headroom and can generate both public and private investments. And basically this goes round and round. And of course, there is the other layer that we've been recently exploring, which is the integration of the proceeds of renewable natural capital of countries into sovereign debt management or wider public finance management. What I mean here is, for example, how the carbon credits, especially jurisdictional now within the Article 6 could be integrated into a specific debt instruments, like through, for example, complementing or substituting the interest rates, or collateralizing through creation of sinking hubs, sinking funds. So for this very purpose, we have come up with the so-called financial materiality assessment framework, where we are looking into how these structures could directly impact the DSA and the credit ratings of specific countries. And we have been very recently piloting this framework in Ghana, and I invite everyone to read the report we have published last month, which you can see on the next slide. But basically, the idea of this this framework, as I said, is like to look at the different layers of KPIs. And here we identified the forest cover as the headline KPI that would determine, for example, the step up or step down in the interest rate. As we imagine, this would fall within sustainability linked bond. So the forest cover would be the KPI that would trigger the step up or step down in the interest rate. But to achieve the forest cover KPI, there are like lower layers or lower levels of KPIs that impact this one. And this, for example, in the case of Ghana, we identified the unsustainable cropland expansion, the illegal gold mining, the illegal logging, unsustainable cocoa expansion. So basically, we looked into into how these activities impact the key KPI, but also how managing or preventing these activities would impact the macro fiscal KPIs of the country. So I won't go too much into weeds here, but I do invite you to look into this report. and we are planning on the second stage of this work. So it would be probably interesting also to talk with Jennifer about how the work you're doing on the mangroves there. But yeah, basically, this is what one of our recent engagements in sub-Saharan Africa. We are also working with it with some other countries. And on top of that, we have developed this so-called KPI accelerator, through which we help interested countries in the preparation for different sustainability-linked debt instruments structuring. We're talking this here about the pre-issuance stage. Basically, we try to identify with the countries which are the gaps, which are the data gaps, we create the needs assessment. So basically, we identify the missing
Gregor,
pieces.
if you could wrap up in 30 seconds.
I will. So we help countries identify how to structure such instruments faster and more impactfully. And I will stop here, but more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Perfect. And I think, as you have said, as the publication shows, nature is the shock absorber. The right indicators can potentially be the de-risker, which perhaps reduces that cost of capital. I'm going to our final speaker, and pleased to invite Paula to take the floor. Paula Guerra, who is the plastics lead in Ambition Loop, speaking to us about finance in the Textile Action Agenda. Paula, over to you in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, so I'll do it very, very quickly. We are diving into the Textile Action Agenda, and as you may know, we are facing a multifaceted crisis with the textile industry, especially due to microplastic pollution, chemical pollution, water contamination, and the waste crisis. So here we're working in collaboration with different actors in a very diverse stakeholder network with local governments, NGOs, private sector, academia, UN member states, especially in the Global South, where is a significant amount of textiles that are being produced, but especially they are being disposed in informal dump sites, especially in Chile in Latin America and also in Ghana in Africa. So we're generating a huge environmental and social impact. If we go to the next one, please. Okay, so we are building this Textile Action Agenda, and that what we wanted to build on is to, we have people in the middle with people and health as the center, and of course, all the problems that I've been tackling before about microplastic contamination and water contamination and ecosystem disruptions. And what we want to do is to create this bridge between state and non-state actors to create this ambition and to go towards the ambition to diminish these environmental and social impacts, and having these enablers as knowledge, products and dissemination, science, technology, and innovation is super important, policy and governance, and of course, mobilizing the finance for this transition towards sustainability in the sector. There are multiple geographical challenges, regulatory frameworks, but also there are incredible existing work on textiles coalitions, innovation projects, research solutions. So we want to leverage all these incredible best cases and leverage sustainability within the sector. And we can pass to the next one, please. How we're going to do this, as I mentioned before, our main aim is to accelerate the ambition of the relevant stakeholders and leverage the current programs and projects. First of all, the main areas of work is identifying the relevant stakeholders, enforcing and enabling a sustainable network for the advocacy of this agenda, identify the best practices and escalation the best innovations. Our aim is to drive innovation to the maximum impact to accelerate a systematic change in the sector. All these based on transparency, confidence between the stakeholders, and science-based. The Textile Action Agenda governance is essential for us, including inclusiveness and transparency through all its members. We have already started our first hub in the Global South with endorsement of the government of Chile to create a national textile agenda. We have been working very closely with Columbia University for science-based solutions for microplastics within the textile sector, and with the private sector, especially in the European Union, in order to comply their main goals with the EPR, the Extended Producer Responsibility in textiles that is currently being implemented. And here opens an opportunity to work in Africa and to create this coalition of different stakeholders within the Textile Action Agenda, as we know that Africa is one of the significant producer of of textiles and garments, but also a significant place where these secondhand textiles are being disposed in informal sites. That's it. Thank you very much. I wrapped it up very, very quickly as I could.
Paula, thank you so much. You've helped us to give us at least 10 minutes for us to have further conversations as needed. I think in terms of the Q&A, we'd like to hear if there are any thoughts about the valuable lessons you have learned in relation to financing either your own or other opportunities. And what do you need from this from this community to drive action faster? And I think if I can relate additionally to that, if you want to take a key message to COP30, what will it be? What is the thing that needs to change? And the floor is open if anyone would like to speak. If there is no volunteer, I would like to, if possible, ask a question to Andrew Mude from the African Development Bank. In terms, so I think one of the questions was around the use of data and policy, and what is the best way to bring partners to the table to provide that support? Because, and I think you spoke a little bit about the fact that you're working in Ethiopia currently. If in 1 minute you could maybe share some context along those lines. If anyone else has a specific question, please come in. But Andrew, over to you. And Anne-Marie, if you would like to ask any other specific question after that, please go ahead. Andrew.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jean-Paul. So I think, well, I mean, bringing partners, I think this is a big part of what this platform is doing. Already, I have some names of those I want to engage, but actually, I'd say ACRIFA, for example, we are actually now just approved a reevaluation of our change of our name from Africa Climate Risk Facility for Adaptation to Framework. And the reason it's now a framework is that on top of just mobilizing resources, we are finding just the bringing partners together who are aligned around the priorities of this framework is very important. And of course, it will vary at the country level, at the regional level, or at kind of more the conceptual level of design. But there are some partners already, and some of them who took the stage today, others who I see are asking questions that we are already involved in. Of course, there are those that we are involved in from a point of view of designing operations that would be supported. There are others who we are who have been involved also in the process of developing the conceptual framework of ACRIFA. But I would like to say more kind of conceptually, one of the areas that we see that is very critical. A lot of the speakers who have spoken here have talked about the importance of concessionary resources. We are finding that even at the country level, countries themselves are willing to use some of their, what we would call headroom, but the resources that they have as a result of the debt distress that was talked about to more effectively catalyze support to their private sector. And they're seeing that intersection of finance insurance is important. So I think government also serves as a very important coordinating platform of partners and relevant operations. Thank you.
No, that's really perfect. Thank you so much, Andrew, for that very useful answer. We have two hands up, and I will ask each person to speak in 1 minute and then hand over to Anne-Marie. If I could go first to Helmi and then to Rory. 1 minute each, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for all these presentations. Very interesting, and I will further pursue. But the one proposal and question I have is, I believe that ecosystem service payments, together with everything else we have heard today, is a very important tool, a market-driven mechanism to fund the mitigation and adaptation to climate change. And I would like to hear, see, and join forces more to put the frameworks together for carbon credit funding from Africa, for natural-based solutions, in particular for our farmers in Egypt, better access to markets, better access to the global market, to the regional market, to the continent market. But I see a huge opportunity there and a lever for system change, which we should focus on. Thank you.
Thank you. Great point. Rory.
Sorry, it's like Rory and Chiedza, so we're two people sharing a camera here.
Yes.
So I'm coming from like a carbon project developer perspective, and I think there's a massive opportunity in leveraging off of some of the legacy carbon projects, and rather than new project developers coming in, how do we scale up the lessons learned from projects that have successfully mobilized climate finance to last mile? So the carbon Kariba Red project, Red Plus Carbon project, worked with communities, got climate financing to the front line. So that's a positive example. How do we scale that so we don't have duplication of effort? Then secondly, carbon project developers can bridge the billions in commitment to and aggregate communities, smallholder farmers. How do we accelerate their capacities that beyond carbon to tap into other types of financing and insurance? That's my contribution. Thank you.
Wonderful. I think fantastic point. I think both of those, both questions and comments, I think are very useful and food for thought. And I think if we can further share experiences, possibly by sharing your contacts, we can create those linkages. I would just like to offer a few comments, and then I'll hand over to Anne-Marie, who can perhaps close. Sorry, Jacinda?
Yes, thank you, JP. Thank you, everyone, for those amazing contributions. Honestly, I would like to just add one thing that is also coming out, and she said, saying your name wrong, but I know your point is aggregation. And I think that one of the reasons why we really continue to have this call is because we know that in order to get to the scale and dissemination, the aggregation is going to be critical. And what does aggregation take? Connecting partners under vehicles, and what are the vehicles? People who have put together the vehicles. So we really hope that, you know, these opportunities that you do continue to partner with the people on the CREFA to link into that insurance product, if that makes sense in your region. So really excited to see these connections and really want to encourage everyone to continue to do that on and offline. Thank you.
No, perfect, Jacinda. And I will just summarize by saying that pooling, this aggregation point, I think emerges very strongly from today's call. Secondly, there needs to be support and capacity and data to people developing projects so that the pipeline is effective. Thirdly, de-risking, the use of instruments that allow to address sometimes the difference in timeline. Nature-based projects in particular have a long-term return. They have a very good return, but it's a more long-term. And the nature of financial instruments is often tomorrow. And we need to address that, and de-risking instruments are a key part of that. And then really connecting the pool, the project preparers, the pipeline with the investors who are interested. And I think that's a huge opportunity. So I will stop there and I will hand over to Anne-Marie for some concluding messages from her side and any other issues that she would like to address.
Great. No, thank you very much. I think just a reflection from me. I mean, there's just a richness of initiatives, ideas, methodologies, challenges. And I think Jean-Paul said, you know, what is it that we want to bring to COP in Belém? And I think one of the things, and Nigel sort of proposed this framework, you know, with the pipeline, you know, projects, the investors on one side, the rules of the game. And I wonder if through Ambition Loop, we could put some actual names of drivers around those different sort of boxes. Because I think that addresses that point of scale, ambition, and to use the Ambition Loop, but actually demonstrates that there are actually different stakeholders in this ecosystem that are trying to solve these problems, whether they're the project developers, whether they're the agencies that are facilitating, whether they're the investors. And just the last thing I want to say is the private sector is participating very actively. We've heard from Humanity Insured. We didn't hear from Dorothy around ANCA, but ANCA is a membership of African financial institutions and fund managers, and they are trying to solve these problems. And so we need to have their names on this sort of framework as well. And I think that's a powerful message to deliver however we want to deliver, about the fact that African stakeholders with their partners are solving these problems in a very creative way, leveraging our own capital. And so if we can kind of work towards that message in whatever form that might be. And Nigel, I think your framework actually, we need to put some names and meat around it and deliver that.
I think a lot of this...
So that's a kind of a call, and you know, happy to take it, you know, forward in some form or another. So I'm supposed to close, but Nigel, I'm going
No,
to.
I was going to say challenge accepted, right?
To comment on that, yeah.
Jacinda just said challenge accepted, but just before I gave her the task, right? But I think just a lot of what Jacinda's doing anyway. But I think your point about let's populate that it's an attempt at a map. That always a map is never the same as a territory, but I think populating it with, in particular, you know, an African version. I mean, that map can be applied at many different scales, but an African version of a map populated with African stakeholders, African initiatives. There's a lot of it, a lot of amazing work that I've heard about. And I'm just sitting here excited about the amount of innovative work and just wondering how we can project outwards more the positivity of innovation and dynamism that is happening in Africa right now. So thank you so much. Yeah, and as Jacinda says, Jacinda has accepted the challenge.
Thank you, Jacinda, and just want to thank everybody for spending the time and sharing, and look forward to continuing this.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Anne-Marie, thank you so much. It was a real
Bye-bye.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.